Hi, on this channel I talk about DaVinci Resolve, and a lot of the time I talk specifically about the Fusion page of DaVinci Resolve. Also, a lot of the time I try to keep things pretty approachable. Lots of people will find my channel having never opened the Fusion page, if even DaVinci Resolve. So I try to keep things fairly introductory when I touch on different topics, but today I want to do something a little different. Today we're going to make this. I am splashing this on screen because we haven't made it yet. But that's what this is the thing we're going to make. And it looks pretty simple, but we are going to construct this animation using some of the coolest, most powerful, most flexible systems inside the Fusion page. Now, I expect this video to be most valuable to people who are a little familiar with the main Fusion toolset and navigating around Fusion, although I hope going step by step that most people will still be able to follow along no matter what, and hopefully get some inspiration for what they can do, what they can create with some of these really cool tools I'm going to show you, lots of which are, a few steps below the surface of what you might find when you first open up Fusion. So let's get started. I am here in Resolve. On the Fusion page, I just have one media out node. Of course, anything we do in the Fusion page, we get plugged into that, gets sent back to the edit page. And we are going to start this process by either clicking this button to create a polygon node or pressing Shift Space to pull up the search bar and searching for polygon. Important to note, we do not want S polygon to work inside the shape system. There are lots of things that you can do both inside and outside the shape system, but the specific tools we're going to use to really show off in this video require you to use the main polygon tool. So we have that here. We can preview that on viewer 2. I have this set to this single view here. And if I just click in frame, I will click once, hold Shift to make sure it's a straight line, click again, we've got a little line. If I pull up border width, wow, we've got a line. And of course, you might notice this is a pure black and white image, even though we only made the line here. The background isn't transparent per se, because this is a mask node. So if we were to create a background node and connect that up, and preview the background node, you would see, oh, now we have a transparent background, and the shape in the middle here is whatever color we set this background node to, but the polygon node itself is black and white because this is mask data. So whatever you connect this to in this blue mask input, it will look at the white and black areas and will show whatever is being masked where this white is coming through. And of course, you could like soften this off to where it like fades away, stuff like that. But we've got a polygon, and in this mask we just drew 2 lines, and this toolbar up here, super useful. I can change this to modify, move around these lines, although I wanted these straight. Off the bat, I'm gonna right click on the shape animation and remove this keyframe. It sets that by default. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's annoying. Most of the time I just clear it out by default. But what we're going to do instead is select both of these points, come all the way down this window to this drop down here and click Publish Points or Shift P. If I click that, then in our inspector under Polygon, it adds controls in this window for each of those points separately. And you see this is point data. So if I change these both to 0.5 or 0.5 here, it will be perfectly on the center line. And now we just have 2 separate points that we can control for however we want this line to look in frame. And I can even that back out. I'll do something like 0.3 and 0.7, so it is evenly spaced in frame. Cool. Now we're gonna start doing some cool stuff. We publish these points, and this 0.0, I'm also going to right now go ahead and right click on that 0.0 and publish that again. That will enable this modifiers tab. And now that single point control also lives on this modifier. Right now that doesn't add any functionality, but what this allows us to do is point other controls back to the data stored in this control. Something like on this 0.1, if I right click, I can modify with vector result. I click that, nothing changes, of course, because this vector result is super powerful, but it also does some math when you set it up right away. The way this vector works, it has an origin, distance, and angle, as well as image aspect, but most of the time that isn't as important. So you can see it is generating a point data starting at 0.5, the center of our image. It is pushing it a value of 0.2, and this angle is 0, which just means by default to the right. If I start changing this angle, you'll see this starts to do some wild stuff. It is growing this line and then shrinking it, but what this is actually doing is pivoting around 0.5, 0.5, which is in the very middle of our frame. If I reset this, we don't want this to be tied to the center of our frame. We want it tied to that first point in our line. So if I right click on this origin, go to connect to polygon 1.0, now this length, kind of like I did before, just pushes it horizontal or vertical. But if I bring it down and change the angle, the line stays that length, but pivots around that first point instead. We do want to keep this zeroed out because this main distance is what we're going to work with a lot of the time, and where a lot of the power of what we're building is going to come from. And you know what? Kind of like we did before, we're going to right click on this distance and publish that for reference later. Now I'm going to do a little bit of building out a node tree before we do the next most exciting bits. So we have this one background. I'm going to create a separate second background node, push that above, and even a third background node. This is just something I like to do most of the time. I'm going to make this third background node transparent, and I'm going to use this just sort of like a blank canvas for everything else that we're going to throw on here. Something like this first line we created, if I connect those, it will automatically create a merge node. A lot of times when I'm building effects, this is most useful because on this merge, it gives us access to this blend control, which if you scroll it down, you can control the opacity. That's nice in its own right. Or you can actually easily turn this blend into an on-off toggle by right-clicking on this merge, come to Edit Controls. This is a wild menu I showed off in a recent video, went a bit more into creating custom controls. I'll try to remember to link to that video in the description of this one if you want more info specifically about this system. I don't think we're going to do an awful lot more here in this video. But if I come to this drop down, select that blend control, I can change that visually from a slider control to a checkbox control. If I just click OK, that will move that to the user control. And now it's a checkbox, which it's still generating a number, but where that slider has all those values along the slider, a checkbox only has that binary 0 or 1. Do I want this line on or off if it's checked off, or on? Cool. Simple on-off switch. I do this thing all the time when I'm building controls, especially if this is going to be a control I'm publishing for someone else to use over on the edit page. But we've got this line. I'm going to go ahead and make this something like a darker gray. Is 0.5 enough? We'll see. It's right. It's no. 0.4. And on this polygon, I'll leave this for now. Because this all other polygon, we're gonna just keep white. Nah, let's do like a cool, like blue or something. Cool. This other polygon, that's just floating around, right? And if we connect that to the merge, then the entire screen is this background color, right? So in the thing we're building, this first polygon is going to be sort of the background line, and then we're gonna have this light blue sort of data line actually showing off the percentage or the value that we want animated. So I'm going to go ahead and take this first polygon. I'm going to copy that and just paste it. There are some instances where you might want to use an instanced node. Instance nodes are very powerful, but in this instance, I think I just want to do a copy of the node as is. And of course, when you copy this, it creates a copy of those published points and the modifiers that were already built up there. We're going to, modify these modifiers from here, but good to have some of this work already built out. Although first, what I want to do is actually, I'm going to double click on this 0.0, because remember, we published that 0.0. So if I want this second polygon line to reference that first line, this is a good point to link it to, right? So on that 0.0, I will then connect to that polygon 1.0. And we might see as well, if I'll just preview this one, you can see now these are linked. If I go back to polygon 1 and change that, even though I'm changing that on this first one, but I'm previewing the second one, you'll see that there is one more thing we need to change. That polygon 1 is linked, but we also need to go into that vector on polygon 0.1 and de-instance this control as well, connect it to that polygon 1.0. Of course, making sure your naming is helpful is very helpful, especially when you're adding modifiers and connections, especially on copies of nodes and tools. It can get wild, but now we have this 0.2. So if I pull up two viewers, we'll preview line 1 over here, line 2 over here. And if I just come to line 1 and move it around, you'll see it looks like two copies of the exact same thing, right? I will make sure these fit. It looks like 2 exact copies. But now on line 2, if I come to that vector, I publish that distance, right? I can change this distance, and it's only changing the distance for this second copy, even though over on line 1, if I move this point, they are both linked together. So let's go through the work. Now I connect this line 2 to the second background node, and if I preview that last merge, hey, we've got our little line, and on line 1, this point 1 controls the overall position for all of them. Very cool. Now we are about to dive into percentages, because if we want to generate this number and have it accurately reflected in the visuals, we need to think for a bit about what percentages are. So if we look at line 1, right, this distance that we have published, if I just do something like 0.5, no, I don't want 0.5. I want 0.4 to demonstrate, because the numbers are going to be a little interesting. So the background line has a length of 0.4, right? So if we wanted to visually demonstrate, might bring in text here in a bit as well. If we wanted to demonstrate this coming up to 50%, this line 2 would have to come up to a value of 0.2, then that would be halfway. And we could build that out with this background line just being static, always at a length of 0.4 or 0.5 or whatever. But what if we want the option to expand the total size of this background line while keeping the math for the distance of this foreground line intact? Then we need to start thinking about percentages, right? And this is where we're going to come back to the fact that we have published this distance control. We could right click on this published distance, but I'm actually going to go back sort of one layer to this other vector we created, and on this distance that already has a published modifier on it, I'm going to right click. I'm not going to modify with, I'm going to insert a calculation modifier. You have 2 options. Calculation just gives you 2 operands and you can affect them in different ways. So I'm just gonna do this first operand, insert, and now we had that layer, we had the vector and then the published distance. Now we have slid in between that gap. We have the vector on that distance parameter. We have this calculation modifier, and on the first operand of this modifier, we have that published distance. We're going to leave that for now, because on this second operand, we're going to right click and connect to the vector on line 1, that same distance, which if we recall is 0.4. Now by default, it adds these values together. We don't want that. You want to change this instead to multiply. And now if I go back to the distance for this second line, instead of sort of a flat distance, now this control is doing something different. Now this number is being multiplied by the distance of the background line. So if we go back to that 50%, math we were doing earlier, no matter how long we change that background line to be, if we want this foreground line to always go to 50%, then hey, we just need to multiply that background line by 0.5 and it will come exactly to halfway. And so this could be a control you could just publish. And for instance, if I come up to, something like 0.9, 90%, if I go back to this line 1 distance, no matter how far I shrink it, it will always maintain a proportional gap. It will always be 90% of however long or short I make this line to be. If I bump it up to 0.5, then that 0.5 on 0.5, you will see, hey, back on vector, is a distance of 0.45. This is a helpful control if you just want this to be static or to animate this yourself. You could stop here, but let's add an extra layer of animation using the very powerful, I'm gonna right click, modify with anim curves. Anim curves, in its own right, super powerful. I have at least one dedicated in-depth video on anim curves for you to check out. But for now, this is what we're working with. By default, it goes over the entire length of your clip if it is set to either duration or transition. And the scale is set to 1. So over the duration of your clip, it will generate from the offset, 0, up to a value of 1. So this is kind of interesting. Oh, and I added this on the wrong value. Haha. I must have added this on, yes, this line 1. I will change that back. I want that at 0.5. I want this anim curves on the distance on this 0.9 for this foreground value. There we go. Modify with anim curves. Yeah, the background bar we want to stay static. if I on this transition or duration, we'll see this is actually a pretty nifty progress bar. No matter how long your clip is over the duration of your clip, it will go from 0 all the way up to 1. Cool, but what if we just want this to animate over a certain period of time? Then we can change this from duration to custom. I will just set a custom input of 1, come up, I don't know, 12 something frames, up to a value of 1. And now this scale slider or bar here replaces that other static control we have. So if we change this to 0.5, that will be exactly half the value, and you can see it animates on and then just holds. We could open this up in the spline viewer, find the input here, select those nodes, press S to smooth. You can press T if you want to change these easing amounts. And then, hey, you have a little shoo. Pretty nice. I kind of lied, not kind of lied, but we are going to revisit that edit control page because this scale is a screw slider, so you could very easily like go above 1 or below 0. And if this was a control I was going to publish, that's a lot of control to give the end user and can be confusing. So if I come to edit controls, come down to scale, I'm going to change that from a screw control to a slider control. And I will just change the range of this so you can only go from 0 or 1. I'm also going to change this allowed parameter because you can manually type in number values here. Not a lot of people will mess with that, but I just want to make sure, no, this can only go from 0 to 1. That of course will bump into this user menu. And now I can change that value, but it will still animate over the same period of time. Super cool. And what's pretty wild, if we go back to that tool, we can see that animation reflected in this 0.1. Remember, all of these stacked modifiers are still living on these published point controls. So we can actually say, we can see that X value sliding from wherever we change that 0.0 to be, that actually goes up. And that will be useful because we'll see if I need to do it this way or another way. I'm actually going to right click now on this shape animation. I don't know if it will let me do this. I'm going to publish this, and then I'm finally going to create a text plus node. And to start, I will just make this high, connect that up to our merges, and now we have this high here. And to double check, because I think I just saw an option, I'm going to go back to that line 2. I'm going to get rid of this for now, the thing I just did, this final publish, because over on text, I have this layout, and on the center of this text, I'm going to right click and go to connect to vector on line 2, the 0.1 position. And if we have done this correctly, then that high will now slide with the end of this line. And so all we have to do is hop over to transform, change this. You could change this transform layer if you would like to. I don't believe you need to for this example, but if I change this Y offset, then now, we've already done the math for this move in vertical space. And I believe if we come back to this published 0.0 parameter, yeah, we can change this and it all still stays synced because we have stacked these published and links and all this other things off of each other so that really we have this one control here. Of course, you could always add like a transform control after the fact and change it here. But the actual math is all calculating from this one point we published. That's pretty nifty. We're almost there. The last little bit, I guess, would be actually having this text reflect the value or the percentage that we are animating. We're going to do a little bit of stuff here that I showed off in a recent video with text expressions. The last few videos have sort of built on each other in interesting ways. If you've missed those, absolutely go back and check them out. Of course, we'll cover just the essential bases here. But now we need to look at where we can pull the value, right? This line is animating, if you remember, back off this anim curves. Remember, this is going from a value of 0 to 1 based on that scale. So if I hop into this text one again, I'm going to right click in here, make an expression. And if I just come to anim curves, the capitalization is important. If I just do value, is it result? No. Oh, anim curves 1. Hey! But our anim curves is generating that, full animation, right? But because this anim curves is going from that 0 to 1, it's trying to be precise, so it's getting us all these extra decimal points. But we want to limit this decimal point, right, to a percentage. First thing I'm going to do here is take that anim curves value, and I'm just going to times that by 100, because remember, anim curves is working on a value of 0 to 1. A full percentage is a value of 0 to 100. If I do that, now we have 48 point whatever, whatever, whatever. And if we want this to be only 48, we can use expressions again. There are some different ways we could do this to technically be more precise, but what we are going to do here is type in ceil and then parentheses around that math we did. And so what this will do is it will look at whatever is inside of these parentheses and always round up. Now, I did say this is a little imprecise because it will always round up as soon as it tips over that whole value line. So like in this example, if this was 48, this works here. So it's 48.4, which if you were just rounding in general would round down, but since we are doing ceiling, it is always rounding up. So if we click off, it always goes to 49. So in reality, all this might mean is that it gets to our final value a little before the animation of the bar in the slide completes. Not awful in this situation. Of course, this is a percentage, so we will add in a period here, and then a parentheses, percentage sign, parentheses, and then when I click away, it will add a percentage point. This period is telling this expression, okay, do whatever you did here, but then just sort of like paste on immediately whatever is after that period. And because we put this percentage sign inside those quotation marks, now parentheses, lots of words, then it just pastes in that exact text. You could always add in a space inside those quotation marks and it would add a little space in. Doesn't look great in this instance, but if you did something like space tacos, it would be 67 tacos, which animates up. Of course, that percentage sign does look good without the space. And now let's check it out. We have this bar at 0%, the anim curves drives the bar, drives the text, and I can always go back to that background line and change it to start over here. Everything moves with it. But if I go in to that distance for the background line, crank that up, the number isn't changing because the number is still correct. It is always that 67% of however long this background line is. The math stays mathing, everything stays proportionally correct. We're doing some fun stuff here. If you're following along, you just did some fun stuff here. And like I said, not the most flashy animation, but we did some kind of flashy stuff along the way. We published points along a path. We have that vector result modifier to control the distance. We use the calculation modifier to keep our proportions between those variable distances correct. We used anim curves. We tied the position of the text to that existing animation slide that we had already created using that publishing system. That's the strength of a lot of this sort of publishing and connecting system. You can use math you calculated in one place to drive multiple effects. Super cool. And I know for the right crowd, that's been poking around Fusion. A lot of these tools will help elevate your stuff to the next level. Super happy to share it with you all. Haven't, I believe, as concisely, or I haven't shown off as many of these disparate features in one dedicated video. So that's what I wanted to do now. Like I said, there's always more. I talked about anim curves in a video. I talked about some text expressions in another recent video. I talked about those publish controls. What was that even called? That edit controls window in another recent video. Always more to learn in Fusion, but good to know some of how they can work together to do some pretty exciting stuff. Hope you think it was cool too. This is the kind of stuff I'm all about. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.